Okay, welcome in. How's everybody doing? Let me just make sure I am live. And yep, all good. How's everybody doing? It's great to be back. Hope everyone is having a good week and finally we have gotten some what a week in New York sports, right? Obviously Cody Bellinger this afternoon resigns with the re-signs with the Yankees on a 5-year, $162 million deal. We're going to get into that. Of course, the Giants finally officially hired John Harbaugh as the 21st coach in franchise history. We will discuss that. We'll also discuss the Mets a little bit as they've been in the news recently with the Luis Robert move and also the Bo Bichette signing. We'll touch on the Jets a little bit and who I think the Jets should hire next year when they um, come to the conclusion that Aaron Glenn is not the right coach and have to move on, who I think they should bring in as their head coach. And we will discuss the Knicks, who have been in free fall for a while now and are trending towards being a play-in team. They've lost, I believe, 9 of 11 games. It's been a total disaster for the Knicks recently. So it's a situation that is definitely worth monitoring. But of course, we begin with the biggest news of the day, which is Cody Bellinger. Cody Bellinger is back on a 5-year, $162.5 million contract, and we will get into the specifics of the deal as we go through here. But off the top, it's hard for me to. I don't see how anyone doesn't think this is a massive win for the New York Yankees. From the outset of the offseason, it was very clear. Cody Bellinger was the Yankees' number one target. Period. The end. The Yankees wanted Bellinger back. They wanted him to be their left fielder. He fits the team. He fits the stadium. I believe last year he had like a 900 OPS at home and a 715 OPS on the road. It was obvious that Cody Bellinger was going to be best suited to come back to the Yankees. And the Yankees were able to get it done. It took a long time. It took obviously multiple months of time. But finally, on January 21st, the Yankees were able to bring back Cody Bellinger. And just the specifics of the deal, it's a very interesting contract in terms of how it was structured. So Bellinger gets a $20 million signing bonus up front. It's a front-loaded contract, right? Bellinger gets $32.5 million in the first 2 years and a $20 million signing bonus. So effectively, this deal is 2 years, $85 million up front, and then he has an opt-out. And he can opt out after the second year, he can opt out after the third year, and then if he remains in the contract, he's owed about $26 million for the next 3 years of the deal. There's basically 3 years, $77.5 million remaining on the contract after his opt-out in that second year. And this is a win for the Yankees. And the reason it's a win for the Yankees is even if Cody Bellinger were to opt out, the Yankees have made it clear that they're trying to maximize the window they have remaining with Aaron Judge, Garrett Cole in their primes. And even in 2 years, if Cody Bellinger says, you know what, I had 2 great years, I'm going to opt out. If I'm the Yankees, I'm okay with that because you've obviously made it clear, hey, 2026, 2027, we're trying to win in this window. We're trying to go for it this year and next year. And the best way to do that was always bringing Cody Bellinger back. Bellinger is a guy who fits the Yankees like a glove. He is one of, if not the best defensive left fielders in the game. The Yankees, for years, ever since Brett Gardner retired, have not had a left fielder who they could trust defensively. Bellinger is absolutely outstanding in the field on defense. He's a clutch hitter. He was very good last year in the clutch, and he's a guy who's always going to give you a professional at bat. He's going to grind the pitcher down. He slots in perfectly in the middle of that order. And if you look at the Yankee lineup now, the 1 through 6 is pretty formidable, right? When you look at Grisham and Judge and Bellinger and Stanton and Rice and Jazz Chisholm, it's a really good 1 through 6. And I think the question now is what's next? Everybody kind of always assumed throughout the entire process, hey, Bellinger will be back, Bellinger will be back, Bellinger will be back. Now, what is the next step for the Yankees? And when you look at the Yankee team, and, I pulled it up here, the current bench that the Yankees have going into 2026, and it's not overly exciting, right? You have Ahmed Rosario, who I thought was a good move to bring back, but then you have, and obviously you have Jason Dominguez, who we'll get to in a minute, but you have Dominguez, Rosario, Oswaldo Cabrera, who's coming off of injury, and then J.C. Escarra is the backup catcher. Pretty underwhelming, in my opinion, after Rosario. And I think that when you look at Dominguez, I'm not sure his best role is suited as a backup outfielder, and I promise we will get to him in 1 second. To me, the next move for the Yankees needs to be to bring in a depth outfielder, a right-handed hitting outfielder who can complement the heavy left-handed lineup that the Yankees have. Because if you look at the Yankee lineup as currently constructed, it's 6 lefties and 3 righties, and one of the righties is Jose Caballero. So the Yankees, to me, need to continue to bring in depth right-handed bats. And the guy I love is Austin Hayes. To me, if you're looking to make an upgrade to the Yankee bench, you need to go out and get Austin Hayes. Because Austin Hayes is a guy who last year had a 910 OPS against left-handed pitching, mashes lefties. He's a perfect complement to a Yankee outfield that has Grisham and Bellinger, obviously, who are both left-handed hitters. To me, he would be a perfect complement to what the Yankees have already done. And to me, that's where their next focus should be. I understand everybody wants the starting pitcher, and I think they're in the market for starting pitching. We will see what transpires there. But to me, continue to build the bench. Continue to build depth. That's what great teams do. They have depth. And to me, Austin Hayes would be a perfect complement to what the Yankees have built in their outfield. But listen, this is a win for the Yankees. I can't say it enough that when you're able to get Cody Bellinger for the next 2 years, guaranteed, and you don't even really have to worry about the back end of the contract because there are opt-outs in this contract. And the reality is, if Cody Bellinger gets to the end of his second year and he does what I think I and everybody else expects him to do, which is have 2 really good years here, he's going to opt out again. And you know what? If the Yankees don't want to pay a 33-year-old Cody Bellinger in his 33 to age 35 seasons, they don't have to do that. To me, the only way Cody Bellinger doesn't opt out is if he falls off a cliff the next 2 seasons. And I just don't envision that at Yankee Stadium where, as I said, he thrived last year. Me personally, I think Bellinger's going to have a huge year next year. I think that this is a guy who, again, in the prime of his career, fits the stadium perfectly, fits the team perfectly. I think it's a perfect marriage. I think Bellinger needs the Yankees. I think the Yankees need Bellinger. And I think that's why this got done. So ultimately, very happy that Bellinger's back. And I think that he is the Yankees' second best player. So I think it's a huge move. And, definitely excited to see what's next. And what's next is really the interesting part of this conversation. Because, as we know, the Yankee outfield next year it's Grisham in center field, it's Bellinger in left field, it's Judge in right field. And where does that leave Jason Dominguez and Spencer Jones, who obviously was in AAA last year? And to me, when I look at Dominguez and Jones, the question is, who would you trade, Dominguez or Jones? To me, I would trade Jason Dominguez over Spencer Jones. That's just my opinion. And the reason I say that is Trent Grisham is on a 1-year contract. I think it's very, very possible that Trent Grisham is not a Yankee beyond 2026. Spencer Jones is a center fielder. The Yankees view Spencer Jones as a center fielder. It came out today, it was reported that the Yankees do not view Jason Dominguez as a center fielder. And they're going to have a left fielder for at least the next 2 years, if not longer, in Cody Bellinger. So, to me, the Yankees, and it might not happen before the season, and I'm very aware that it might not happen before the season. But to me, the Yankees need to find a trade partner for the Yankees need to find a trade partner for Jason Dominguez. That would be my move if I was running the New York Yankees. And, I'd love to trade him to Milwaukee for Freddie Peralta. I've talked about Peralta ad nauseum on here. We'll see what happens. But to me, there has to be a move, as Dominguez is still a young player, right? His value is not gone, right? I don't know if it's at its peak. I don't think it is, because of the defensive issues last year. But you have to, in my opinion, you can trade Jason Dominguez and you can have Spencer Jones waiting in the wings to be the future center fielder. You can still do that if you want to. Whereas Dominguez now, with the addition of Bellinger, who's a left fielder, he's not really going to play a lot of center, especially as he ages, right? to me, the path to Jason Dominguez impacting the New York Yankees, I don't really see it anymore. Unfortunately, because I like Dominguez. I think he's a good hitter. I think he has a lot of potential. But I don't see the path to him impacting the New York Yankees any longer with this move to bring back Bellinger. So we will see what's next for the Yankees. And, kind of staying on the same topic, trying to structure the show a little bit more, have a little more structure to the show because, we don't want to go from baseball to football. So we'll try to stay on baseball and then we'll get to the other sports. How about the Mets? I mean, the Mets have gone out. I love what they've done recently, right? This is a Yankee fan speaking. I love what the Mets have done recently. They go out and they are in the news because of the Kyle Tucker decision, right? Steve Cohen tweets, waiting for the white smoke to come out, like when the Pope is announced, and everybody's like, oh, the Mets are gonna get the Mets are gonna get Kyle Tucker. This is great, Kyle Tucker's gonna be a Met, and all of a sudden it comes out $60 million a year going to the Dodgers. The Dodgers are, what can you say about them? Another conversation for another day. But the Mets immediately pivot. They give Bo Bichette 3 years, $126 million. And there's an opt-out after the first and second year. And a lot of people, and someone actually, shout out to the person who replied to one of my tweets on this. I thought it was great, the comparison they made. And I really think it's interesting to kind of go through. So Bichette got $42.5 million a year, average annual value. Now you say, well, that's a ridiculous overpay. That's what everyone's saying. Oh, how could you pay Bichette $42.5 million a year? Well, let's look at the contracts though, right? So the Mets give Bichette 3 years, $126 million, 42.5 average annual value. Cody Bellinger, if you look at his contract, if you parse it out, he got $20 million up front before signing, basically, as a signing bonus, and he got $65 million in the first 2 years. So really, the Yankees, and then there's an opt-out. So really, the Yankees are paying Bellinger 2 years, $85 million, which is 42.5 average annual value. So it's not that different, like it's a pretty similar contract if you actually look at the nuts and bolts of what the contract actually is, and not the full 5-year deal that is obviously being reported. So I don't hate the contract. I love Bo Bichette, and I pulled this up. I wanted to read it. A great stat about Bichette. Bo Bichette's 59 hits with runners in scoring position led Major League Baseball last season, a .391 average with runners in scoring position. He ranks among the top 4 players since 2021 in batting average with runners in scoring position, hits with runners in scoring position, and hits with runners in scoring position with 2 outs. He has a .330 career average and a .904 OPS with runners in scoring position. Listen, I love Bo Bichette. I do. I love the hitter. I absolutely love his profile at the plate. I think he's a beast in the batter's box. I think he is just a damn good hitter. I really do. The concern I have with the Mets is the defense, right? And I look, I think the Mets have an unbelievable lineup. You look at Francisco Lindor, Bo Bichette, Juan Soto. I mean, that's one of the top 3 1-2-3s in the game. It really is. You could say the Dodgers are better with Freeman and Betts and Ohtani and all the guys they have there, and maybe the Phillies are better. But I mean, the reality is the Mets have one of the best 1-2-3s in baseball in their lineup, and I like the depth pieces that they have. I like Marcus Semien. Can Semien be a bounce back candidate? I don't think he's a bad player. Obviously, they made the Luis Robert trade, which we'll get to. To me, the Mets have a very, very good lineup. And I think losing Alonso, missing out on Tucker, I think they pivoted very well here. The issue with the Mets is the defense. They are playing Bo Bichette at third base, and he has never played third base before in his career. Very risky move. Very risky move by the Mets to play a guy who they're paying $40 million a year to play third base when he has never played third base before. And at first base, they have Jorge Polanco, who's also, not really a guy who plays a lot of first. And is going to obviously be learning the position. And you obviously look at Soto in right field. Soto's not a good defender. So the Mets have issues defensively. And their rotation is still a mess. The current rotation is like McLean, uh, Holmes, Senga, Manaya. It's like the same guys as last year. David Peterson. It's a very uninspiring rotation. But I do like what they have done in their lineup, and I do think they have one of the most formidable lineups in baseball. I think the question, excuse me, the question is going to be their defense and their pitching. Can they go out and get a pitcher, either now or at the deadline, that is going to really impact them? And can the defense hold up enough to where the Mets are able to let that offense shine through? Because again, I think it's a terrific offense. And one of the depth guys I mentioned, Luis Robert, they traded for him. They traded Luis Angel, Luis Angel Acuna. They traded the brother of Ronald Acuna in this trade. And, not a huge package. Acuna obviously came onto the scene a few years ago, but never really panned out as a prospect. And the Mets kind of take a flyer on Robert. And look, Robert is a guy who's had a very up and down career. Early in his career, first 4 years, very strong, right? And then the last 2 years, he's been in the 600s with OPS. And he struggled recently. But two things on Robert. When you look at Robert's second half last year, he had an 808 OPS in the second half of the season. Very good. Finished the year strong. And he's coming from a place in Chicago where there was literally no incentive to play baseball. And I understand you want guys who are going to be grinders, they're going to play every day, and I get that. Robert's not that guy. Robert clearly takes time. He takes games off. He takes at bats off. That's the kind of guy he is, which is not a good thing, but I do think he's going to be motivated in the bright lights of Gotham. I do think he's going to be motivated to play in New York and play for this Mets team that should be competitive next year. So, look, you lose Alonso, you miss on Tucker, you lose Nimmo. Bringing in Simeon, Bichette, and Luis Robert, I think was a good pivot offensively for the Mets. That's my opinion. Do I think the Mets are winning the World Series next year? No. Do I think the Mets have a little bit of a weird defensive team? Yes. But overall, I am a fan of what the Mets have done with their lineup, and I think personally they have one of the better lineups in baseball. And I think that the Bichette deal is a great move for the Mets from an offensive perspective. Don't get lost in the contract. For the first 2 years of the contract, it's basically the contract that the Yankees are paying Cody Bellinger. So it's not much different. And I think that ultimately the Mets did a good job in securing Bichette, who was one of my favorite players on the market, as you guys know, and getting Robert in a trade to play center field. So I think that's it for baseball. Pivoting to football and the New York Giants and the New York Jets. So, I've lived on this earth for about 30 years. I turned 30 later this year. So I'm not old. I haven't seen a ton. But I've seen a fair amount in my day watching sports. And there's very few times where I am watching sports over the course of my life and I've said, I can't believe what I'm watching. There's a couple moments, the David Tyree play in 2007, the helmet catch in the Super Bowl. That's one of those plays where it's like supernatural. You can't believe you're watching it. And obviously, there's other ones throughout my 30 years on this earth, but the Giants introducing John Harbaugh as their head coach was surreal. It was surreal. And it was surreal for a few reasons. The first is the Giants, in their 100-year history, their illustrious history, right? They have 4 Super Bowls. They have 8 total championships going back to the pre-Super Bowl days. In their great history, they have never hired a head coach who previously has won a Super Bowl. That's really amazing if you think about it. They have never hired a head coach who previously has won a Super Bowl. And I mean, John Harbaugh, everything about it, John Harbaugh is the New York Giants head coach. It is kind of hard to fathom that this guy who was the coach in Baltimore for 18 years, and you always respected him, and you never really thought about him because you thought he was going to be the coach there forever, and obviously he gets fired, and the way everything worked out, it is surreal that John Harbaugh is the Giants head coach. And John Harbaugh was, and I believe is, the perfect hire for the New York Giants. Instant credibility. That's what I think about when I think of John Harbaugh. A guy who's going to walk in there, and from the minute he steps foot in that building, he is the man. He is the standard. He is the standard bearer. And there's no one who he doesn't have to sell himself on it. He doesn't have to sell himself to anybody because his resume speaks for itself. And that is something that we have not had in New York from a football standpoint in a long, long time. And the process that the Giants took to hiring John Harbaugh is really remarkable. And I want to I want to kind of talk through that because the work that the Mara and the Tisch family did, specifically the Mara family, I mean, I want to give a major shout out to John Mara, who, everybody saw the pictures from the press conference. This is a guy who's going through a lot. This is a guy who's battling cancer, and he's fighting. He's fighting for his life, and this guy put that on hold to make sure that John Harbaugh was the next coach of the Giants, and he did everything in his power to make sure that the Giants didn't screw this up and John Harbaugh was the next head coach of the Giants. I have unbelievable respect for John Mara and what he did. And obviously, shout out to Chris Mara as well, his brother, who kind of did the legwork on this because John is obviously battling cancer, as I mentioned. And Chris Mara made a great impression on Harbaugh and obviously was a huge part of why this deal got done. And the Giants proved that they still are a flagship franchise. The New York Football Giants, as John Harbaugh said, that still matters. That still means something in the scheme of the National Football League. It still matters to be in New York. It still matters to wear that jersey. It still matters to be a New York Giant. And that's what this showed. And it's like when you go to a big college, you go to the University of Michigan or you go to, Stanford or whatever, you go to one of these big colleges, you have a network, right? When you went to college, people would say, you always have the network of your school. The Giants network really helped them land John Harbaugh. Tom Coughlin apparently was extremely influential in getting John Harbaugh to be the Giants head coach. According to Coughlin, multiple conversations that they had on the phone talking about the organization, talking about how the building operates, talking about the history of the franchise, talking about the Maras and the Tisches, all that stuff. Coughlin, a guy who, you could argue was done wrong by the organization and fired after 2015, a guy who was a two-time Super Bowl champ. And he was fired, and Jerry Reese, who was his GM, who obviously was very at fault for the downfall of that era, was not let go. And Tom Coughlin holds no grudges. Even if he does, he was still able to say, you know what, I love this organization, and I'm going to put a good word in for this guy. And obviously everything else we heard about Eli Manning speaking to him, even the former head coach, which I couldn't believe, the former head coach Brian Daboll speaking to him. It was just a special few days for the New York Giants, culminating in introducing Harbaugh as the 21st head coach. And the work now begins for John Harbaugh. And obviously we will have so much to get to in the offseason here with the draft and free agency and what the Giants do, with the number 5 pick and how things kind of work out and all those things. But as Harbaugh says, man, he has a enthusiasm unknown to mankind, and it was really special seeing him. And I think that you talk about expectations, right? You say, well, and I've heard some people on the radio and WFAN and stuff talking about, well, what are the expectations? I mean, you can't expect to make the playoffs. You can't expect to win a Super Bowl. You can't expect to do this, all those things. I think that John Harbaugh laid out what the expectations are, right? We have to earn the right to be world champions in the city of New York. And if that doesn't make you want to run through a wall, I don't know what will. So the Giants introduced Harbaugh, unbelievably excited as a Giants fan for John Harbaugh to be the head coach after what we've seen here the last 10 years. And I can't wait, man. I wish it was September. I cannot wait for this season to start and just to kind of be a fan in this era. This is going to be an era of Giants football that I think we never forget, and we'll see how everything goes. Staying on that topic, I did have an idea when I was kind of looking at the Harbaugh stuff and all the excitement that it was bringing Giants fans and everybody was so excited and oh, we got John Harbaugh and how much how much the organization is now just like it feels like it's been lifted off the ground. It feels like it's like at a new level, right? Flipping over to the Jets, the other team in MetLife Stadium that shares MetLife Stadium with the Giants. The Jets are bringing back Aaron Glenn in 2026. I understand that Aaron Glenn's going to be the coach. Obviously, there's like 10 openings in the NFL. The Jets are not firing Aaron Glenn now. I fully understand that. But I think there's a pretty good chance that the Jets will be moving on from Aaron Glenn at the end of next season. And I was thinking to myself, and I was like, oh, I got it. The head coach that the New York Jets should hire 100% is Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin would be the perfect head coach for the New York Jets. Again, floor raiser, instant credibility, comes in the building, he's got a Super Bowl ring. He knows what it looks like. He knows how to win. This stat that I saw was remarkable looking at Mike Tomlin. Now, over the last 19 years, Mike Tomlin began in Pittsburgh in 2007, and now he he coached in Pittsburgh for 19 years, right? In those 19 years, he never had a losing season. Never. In his 19 years, he never had a losing season. The Jets in that same time frame over the last 19 years have had 13 losing seasons. So again, Mike Tomlin, 19 years, no losing seasons. The Jets, 13 of the last 19 years. They've only had 6 winning seasons since 2007 when Tomlin took over in Pittsburgh. To me, it is a perfect hire. And I don't think Mike Tomlin works everywhere. I don't think if you're trying to win a Super Bowl necessarily, Mike Tomlin is the best coach to hire right now because we've seen how he hasn't won a playoff game in, I believe, a decade. But again, you're not trying to win the Super Bowl if you're the Jets. You're trying to just get on level ground and be a mediocre, competent franchise. Mike Tomlin is the definition of competent. Mike Tomlin never had a losing season in 19 years. If I was the Jets, I would absolutely hire Mike Tomlin. To me, he is perfect for the New York Jets. I would absolutely do that. So yeah, I think that's most of everything. I'm still gonna hit on the Knicks. But yeah, I mean it's so interesting, when you just kind of going back to the Bellinger thing. I really wonder if I really wonder what Bellinger is going to do after 2 years. I really am interested because again, he's got the 5 years guaranteed. Right? So he has 5 years guaranteed to be with the Yankees at a very high yearly rate. Obviously, it's higher in the first 2 years, but it's going to still be like $26 million a year, even in the third, fourth, and fifth year of the deal. Will Cody Bellinger, after 2 years, say, you know what, I just want to stay here and finish my, the end of my prime and the latter half of my career with the Yankees, or do I want to test the market again, where he has not been able, he got a big deal here, good for him, but he hasn't really been able to get like the 7-8 year, like the mega deal, obviously. So I'm just very curious, just kind of thinking back to what I was saying about Bellinger. Just extremely curious. Is Cody Bellinger going to opt out after 2 years? I think that's really interesting. Not very important for the Yankees right now, but again, I do think it's interesting. We'll finish up with the Knicks, and there's actually a lot here that I wanted to get to. It's fascinating with the Knicks, and the Knicks last year, they were 2 wins away from the NBA title. They were 2 wins away from making the NBA Finals. 2 wins away. And they obviously lost to the Indiana Pacers in a heartbreaking series. The game 1 of that series is one of the worst sports moments you could have as a Knicks fan where it looks like they're running away with game one. They blow the lead. They turn the ball over. They give up a ton of threes to Neesmith. And then Halliburton, shoots the ball at the end of the game. Buzzer sounds. The ball bounces, up to the Empire State Building, and it comes down and it goes in. And the Knicks end up losing the game in overtime. And that set the stage for that entire series, and that's ultimately why the Knicks lost that series. I bet you if the Knicks won that game, and in my opinion, that series probably goes very differently. But the Knicks lose, and it's reported that they're having these exit meetings at the end of the season, and Leon Rose still supports Tibbs. That's what kind of the discourse was with Tom Thibodeau, and trust me, I will give my full opinion on what happened with Thibodeau, and it'll make sense, I think. So they're having these exit meetings, and it's reported that Leon Rose, who's the GM, he supports Tibbs as the coach. It's also reported that Jim Dolan, the owner of the Knicks, was involved in those exit meetings. And the guy to blame for where the Knicks are right now is 100% Jim Dolan. It was a beautiful 5 years when Jim Dolan just got out of the basketball operations. But as expected, Jim Dolan, knowing his track record, knowing his history, he said, nope, I got to get involved. Nope, I got to meddle. And Jim Dolan spoke to the players, and there were a couple players that said, I don't think I can play for Tibbs anymore. I don't really like the way he uses me. Too many minutes, the whole 9 yards, whatever was said. And Jim Dolan, which has now been reported, it's basically out there in the open, that Jim Dolan went to Leon Rose and said, look, this is a problem. And basically strong-armed him into firing Tom Thibodeau. Now, did Leon Rose think that Tibbs had some issues? Did Leon Rose and Tibbs not get along on certain things? Yes, 100%. But do I personally think that if Leon Rose individually was running the Knicks, that they would have fired Tom Thibodeau? No, I do not. I don't. I think Tibbs would still be the coach. And to me, the bigger issue is what you did after firing Tibbs than before firing Tibbs. But just one point about Tibbs, and one thing that what I would have done if I was running the Knicks, I would have kept Tibbs for one more year. And the reason I would have kept Tibbs for one more year was what happened in the Eastern Conference. Jason Tatum, done. Torn Achilles. Tyrese Halliburton, done. Torn Achilles. What you couldn't afford this year, because this was obviously the best chance that the Knicks have had to go to the finals in 30 years. What you had to do was avoid what's happening now, which was backsliding. Which was basically saying, if we just kind of maintain the status quo, if we maintain our level, maybe make a couple improvements to the bench, do a couple things here, and we just maintain, we will make the finals. Now, you might not have won the finals, but at least you probably would have made the finals. So to me, I would have given him one more year. But the Knicks fire Tibbs. They decide to move on. When you move on from an established head coach like Tom Thibodeau, because he couldn't get over the hump, right? We've seen it before. When you do that, you don't bring in a coach who also has a ceiling in Mike Brown. Mike Brown, what's happening right now with the Knicks, particularly from a defensive standpoint, is not surprising. The last 6 teams Mike Brown coached, including this year, it's been multiple different teams, the Lakers, the Cavs, obviously the Sacramento Kings. Here are the defensive efficiency numbers of the last 6 teams he's coached. 12th, 20th, 24th, 14th, 22nd, 18th. Not a good defensive coach. So the fact that the Knicks are struggling defensively, guys, we knew that was going to happen. He has a track record. He's done this. We know who Mike Brown is. What are you going to tell me with the defense? You want to go back to 2006 when he was coaching LeBron James, one of the 3 best players ever? You want to tell me that's why he's a good defensive coach? He doesn't coach defense. We knew this. And the other instances where teams moved off of an established coach to try to take another step, they didn't hire coaches who had already been in the league, right? The Boston Celtics, they had Brad Stevens for many years. They moved off of Stevens, and who did they hire? Ime Udoka. You know what Ime Udoka had never done before? Head coach an NBA team. Obviously, Ime had his situation. 1 year he's out of the door, he's out of the building. The next coach was Joe Mazzulla, who also had never head coached an NBA team. And they won the championship a couple years ago. You look at the Golden State Warriors. Mark Jackson was the coach for many years. Mark Jackson couldn't get them over the hump. Who did they hire? Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr had never coached in the NBA before. That was the blueprint. If you were going to move off of Tibbs, which I say again, I would have given him 1 more year. But if you were going to move off of Tibbs, you needed to hire a coach who you didn't know the ceiling of that coach. As risky as it may have sounded, you couldn't go from a coach with a ceiling to another coach with a ceiling. You could not do that under any circumstances. And that's what the Knicks did. And here's my issue with Mike Brown. I think it's a little crazy and a little stupid, by the way. If you're talking about firing a coach 45 games into his tenure, newsflash, you didn't hire the right coach. Here's my problem with Mike Brown. Mike Brown is on the sidelines, and obviously there's a rift occurring between him and Karl Anthony Towns, one of the best players on the team. Here's what I don't want to see from Mike Brown. I don't want to see Mike Brown on the sideline yucking it up with Draymond Green. I don't care. He could have won 5 championships with him. I don't care. You're yucking it up on the sideline with another player, laughing at halftime the other day against the Dallas Mavericks when you're down 30 in your own building. You're laughing. There's nothing funny about this. So don't yuck it up with other players and other coaches as you have problems in your locker room. Don't do that. It's juvenile. You look like David Fizdale out there. So that's my problem with Mike Brown. Calling for Mike Brown to be fired. Listen, if they fire Mike Brown, they're absolutely nuts. It would show how incompetent they were for hiring the guy in the first place. Anyway, that's my rant on the Knicks. So, the Knicks, 2 wins from the NBA Finals. They fired Tibbs, and now they can't get out of their own way. But that's the Knicks. That's the history of the Knicks. Anyway, that is the show for today. I really appreciate everyone joining. Again, follow me on social media, Chris_NYY28. Follow me everywhere. Subscribe to the YouTube if you're watching me there. Really appreciate you guys joining. Pumped that Bellinger's back. Really kind of got the juices flowing and got me excited for for spring training, which is about a month away now. So very excited about that, and a lot of good things going on in New York sports, which we'll be talking about as we go forward here. So anyway, hope everyone has a good rest of their week, and I'll see you guys soon.